The invasion of Denmark, also known as the 6-Hour War. The invasion, under the code name Operation Weserübung, would undersee Nazi Germany attacking not only Denmark, but an attack on both Denmark and Norway on the 9th of April 1940. On the same day, Denmark surrendered only hours after the outbreak of the invasion and was fully occupied by enemy forces. The invasion of Denmark consisted of a well-planned combined assault on Denmark to overrun the country as swiftly as possible. The invasion consisted of most of the different elements of Nazi Germany's military working together. It included airborne assaults, naval invasions and landings, and a simultaneous ground assault across the Jutland Peninsula. April 8th, a day before the invasion starts. The troops of the Royal Danish Army were placed on full alert at 13:30. Although warned of the impending attack from Nazi Germany, the Royal Danish Army was to be denied permission to deploy or prepare defensive positions, as the Danish government did not want to give the Germans any provocation for their actions, as had been seen staged and used as an excuse for the invasion of Poland the year before, and instead make their position of a completely neutral and unprovocative nation as clear as possible. April 9th, the day of the invasion. 4:15 a.m. The Danish border is breached on the eastern flank of the Jutland Peninsula at Sade, Rennes, Padborg, and Kruse at 4:15 on the 9th of April, with the Kriegsmarine simultaneously landing troops at Lillebælt. With the Germans being quick to cut off the Danish troops at the border at the beginning of fighting and simultaneously effectively cutting off most Danish lines of communication, the first line of Danish border defense had been effectively overrun and paralyzed. And only 2 minutes later, the alarm was sounded at 4:17, and the first Danish troops were dispatched from the barracks at 4:35, heading to meet the German forces at what would be the first engagement of the invasion, Lundtofte. The first clash happened at Lundtofte, where a Danish anti-tank platoon armed with two 20mm guns and a light machine gun had taken up positions covering the road. A German column appeared at 4:50, and the 20mm cannons opened fire on the armored cars while the machine gun took aim at the motorcyclist. A fire started in a nearby barn, filling the air with smoke and hindering the German advance. Eventually, the anti-tank platoon was forced to withdraw to Ebenra, about 1.5 kilometers to the north. A bicycle platoon prepared a defense of a railway bridge, but enemy fire from the armored cars and strafing fighter aircraft forced them to retreat, and a third of them were captured. The first clash led to the Germans losing 2 armored cars and 3 motorcycles, while the Danes suffered 1 dead and 1 wounded. Another German column reached Høkkerup a few kilometers east of Lundtofte at 5:30. They encountered a roadblock made with farm equipment, set up only 20 minutes earlier by 34 Danish soldiers. The Danes knocked out the 3 leading armored cars, forcing them to pull back. The Germans set up a 37mm gun 300 meters away, but it managed to fire only 1 round before being knocked out by 2 rounds from a 20mm gun. Hand-to-hand combat ensued in which 1 Dane was killed and 3 wounded, 1 fatally. With air support, the 100 or so Germans managed to surround and capture the Danish unit at 6:15. With smaller engagements like the ones at Bjørgskov, Bredevad, Rabsted, and Ebenra following the clash at Lundtofte and Høkkerup, the retreating Danish and pursuing German forces had both met casualties, with the German forces also taking Danish soldiers prisoners of war and the Danish forces inflicting damage and knocking out multiple armored vehicles as well as motorcyclists and tanks. After the continued retreat of the remaining Danish forces on the eastern flank of the Jutland Peninsula, it would soon lead to a final battle, the Battle of Haderslev. One of the few and larger engagements in the short-lived invasion of Denmark was the Battle of Haderslev, which stands as one of the few examples of the inferior but fierce Danish resistance, with larger numbers of troops and engagements. Haderslev had a garrison of 225 men of the Jutland Division under Colonel Hartz, which defended both the barracks in the town and the road leading to it. Troops in the town mobilized at 7 on hearing instructions broadcast from police loudspeaker vans. Bolstered by retreating units, approximately 400 Danes defended the town. 3 roadblocks were set up, 1 with dumping wagons, the other 2 from spare lumber. At about 7:50 on the southern outskirts of Haderslev, a Danish 37mm anti-tank gun with a crew of 5 attacked the approaching armor. 2 German tanks lined up adjacent to one another and opened fire. The Danes landed all 3 of their shots, 1 in a tank's tracks, but 2 of the gun crew were killed and the rest wounded. 1 tank then drove over the gun. Around the curve on Sonderbro Street, 2 20mm cannon and a machine gun put up resistance at the wagon roadblock. The Germans laid down heavy fire. A Danish soldier was killed and 2 were wounded, but the Germans were effectively pinned down. The fighting continued for 10 minutes until the order to surrender was received from Copenhagen by telephone. The Germans were then allowed to proceed into Haderslev, but the Danish garrison stationed there had not received the order to surrender and fired on them. 2 German tanks and a motorcycle proceeded unsuspecting towards the barracks, which were defended by the anti-tank unit from Lundtofte. They opened fire, killing the motorcyclist and blowing the tracks off one tank, sending it crashing into a house. However, the Danish garrison capitulated at 8:15 when the order to surrender finally came through. 1 Danish soldier was killed while defending the barracks, and 3 civilians were killed in the crossfire. After the surrender of the Danish forces, Lieutenant General Walter Wittke, commander of the invading German force of the 170th Division, was shocked when learning how few Danish units were engaged in combat. He even went out to compliment Danish Colonel Hartz, the commander-in-chief of the regiment in the Danish city of Haderslev, and went out to say that Colonel Hartz had some very fine soldiers, as they were able to put up such large resistance. With other battles having happened throughout Denmark in the same time frame as the advancements in the southern Jutland Peninsula. The big ones, like the paratroopers taking the airfields in Aalborg, and the landing of troops in the capital Copenhagen that quickly surrounded the King's Palace and government building, the Danish government decided to capitulate, to avoid the further destruction of Danish cities and the death of more Danish people, and also to gain a more favorable and less harsh of a peace deal that would keep some kind of Danish sovereignty at place.